Cowan. I'm not saying he's the same player. But he might be saying, listen, I can score at the NHL level. Like, give me a look, too. Like, I think there's a few guys that might be wanting to angle for some of those good minutes.
So, Johnny, we just talked about the luxury of time.
Mm-hmm.
The one thing that I haven't, really been able to identify is what team is willing to not blow it up, but willing to part with players that are good players. Like, everybody seems to be like, hey, we can take another step here this year. And I understand San Jose wants to get better. Chicago wants to get better. But they're not going to be playoff teams this year. So is there a team that you would identify that maybe Toronto would circle and say, give them 10 to 20 games and they'll be selling? Whether it's Pittsburgh or, maybe an organization that we're not focusing on that believes they're not a playoff team, but they're trying to at least sell to their ownership, to their fan base. We're going to give these players a run and see how it unfolds in the first 20 games of the season.
Well, I think the obvious answer, Noodles, is the one you mentioned, Pittsburgh.
Yeah.
Like, they have Brian Rust and Rickard Rakell.
Yeah.
Both are legit top six wingers. Both can score 30 goals when playing with good players. Both have decent contracts that the Leafs or any other team could probably absorb if you move out a little bit of money. And if you give them picks and prospects and good young players like an Ethan Cowan's caliber player, you could get that guy. You could get him now, probably, if you wanted. But maybe you wait 10 or 20 games and Pittsburgh realizes they're not going to make it again. And the motivation for the team to move them and for the players to allow themselves to be moved grows a little bit. I think that will be a team that every other club in the NHL will circle and say, okay, let's watch them, because eventually they're going to want to move off those guys. And the other guy, I don't know if he's a top six guy, but he's one of the best third-line players in the league, is that Blake Coleman. Yeah. I think Blake Coleman in his last year in Calgary, I don't know if they're going to want to extend him well into his 30s. He can fetch a pretty price with how good he is and the contract he's on. So I wonder, Calgary maybe not waving the white flag at all, but just saying, we're going to move off some of our expiring guys, Rasmus Anderson, Blake Coleman, and bring in young, talented players. That might be a guy, as the year goes along, that you could look at and say he could help us. Maybe not on your first line, but he's a very good player. He could probably play with Tavares and Nylander on a second line and help them.
MJ, when you look at the DNA change that Brad Treliving is seeking here, now he's sort of, we had him on earlier in the show, and he sort of amended it to talk about, it's a little bit about bringing in different players, but also about changing the internal mentality, the stuff between the years and big moments and all that stuff. But when you look at the way they're going to proceed with, they brought in some guys here. We all know the list. But in your experience, what can be the effect of the subtraction of a player as significant as Mitch Marner, a personality as significant as Mitch Marner? Is there a way you could spin it? Obviously, you're not replacing the 100 points, but there have been situations in sports of addition by subtraction just because it changes the mix somehow. How do you see that?
Yeah, well, two thoughts. One, it's I don't want to be one piling on Mitch Marner as way out the door. He was part of a group that didn't win, but he wasn't the only root cause of the fact that they didn't win. And it feels like the guys liked him. It's not like he was a problem. That somehow removing him and his game or his personality will somehow free up the other guys to go and become greater than they were when he was around. I don't think he had that kind of influence, but there's no doubt, the personality of a team is largely, you guys can attest to this, is largely dictated by their best players. And Mitch Marner was one of the best players. And so whatever that personality was, the team would take some cues from it. And Hayes, you've referenced this a lot over the years. Not that you have a problem with any one of the big four guys, but they're all sort of wired similar. Sort of quieter, sort of internal, sort of driven to be great on their own, but not necessarily outwardly emotional or demonstrative, or someone who reacts in a physical manner rather than going to try to score. So I think, taking Mitch Marner off of the team and replacing him eventually with a player who maybe does some things differently or reacts to stress differently or reacts to tight situations differently, even if they're not as good of a player, will that help steer the team in a little bit of a different direction? That's what you're hoping for, Fest, if you're talking about DNA change from maybe somebody leaving the team. But the other part about it is when Tree talks about growth and the guys that are there dealing with things differently, if it was easy, they would have done it by now. Like, this is not a new phenomenon. This is 10 years in the making. They've had plenty of stressful situations to learn, to react, and to, in theory, do something different the next time through. They haven't, as a group, done anything differently. This looks actually quite similar year after year after year, which is part of the frustration with a team this good. So it's easy to say, and unless, and I'm not even being flippant here, like, unless there's a commitment to like a sports psychologist or like some tangible change other than just saying, let's try to be different. Let's try to be bold. Let's try to be brave. Let's try to be courageous and embrace the stress. They've done that before, and it hasn't worked. So I don't know. Eliminating Mitch Marner, talking about it out loud, I don't know if you can expect it to change significantly because, I don't know. If they could have, they would have.
Yeah. Well, exactly. And that's, there's going to be a lot of carryover.
Yeah.
Like, there's going to be a lot of the same team.
Right.
And they're a good team. Like, they're still a really good team. Like, they have both their goalies, all their defensemen. They're going to add some depth. Yes, Marner's out. That's a very significant regular season piece in particular. But, Waz in. I don't know enough about Michelli to make a projection on what he's going to look like.
You know what he's like, though, Hayes? He might be like, I don't want to stretch too far. He plays a similar style of Mitch Marner, just not nearly as good. Mm-hmm. That makes sense.
Yeah.
Like, he's sort of a complimentary facilitator, creative with the puck, pass-first guy, not robust physically, relatively responsible, and he might get you, if he plays with good players, he might get you 50 points. So versus the 100 Mitch gets, but like that's sort of what he is.
Okay. Well, listen, if it pops here, then that's a good find because they didn't pay a lot for him. But beyond that, there's going to be more additions. There's going to be depth, but there's still going to be a good team. Like this year, I fully expect that there's still going to be a good team. But Florida's going to be a great team.
Yeah.
I think Montreal has improved. I'm curious what Ottawa still has in store the rest of the offseason because they haven't changed a lot. They've kind of brought the band back for the most part. But, it's going to be – Tampa's going to be good. I just feel like those are the teams. Like, I don't think Buffalo's improved. I don't think Detroit's improved. I think Boston's still going the wrong way.
This Montreal team, you got –
if they get a centerman.
Man, like under 25, you got Hudson, Suzuki, Caulfield, Demidov, Slavkovsky, Bolduc now, Fowler, Dobson, Gooley, Reinbacher, Newhook, Dobish in net, and Kirby Doc.
Yeah.
All under 25.
Right.
Alex Newhook is still under 25. That's crazy.
He's 24, coming 25. I checked it out because I thought he was older. But they're going to have to part with some of those guys. Like, you actually might look at Montreal and go, maybe Newhook would be available. Or Kirby Doc might be available. Again,
Anderson, Gallagher.
Yeah, those guys, because they're going to have to move some players around to either add or, just get a little bit more veteran presence. But it'll be interesting to see. Like, I think they're better, but they made the playoffs last year, so they're trying to chip away. Ottawa added Lars Eller, but I think they're looking for Shane Pinto growth. I think they're, Dylan Cousins a full year there, see what he does. Like, there's work to be done, but I like that. That Jordan Spence, I like the addition of him, that right shot D that they brought in. Like, he's going to take Hamanuk's minutes. Like, so I think they're just trying to
be better with it.
Exactly. Just a better player and younger, obviously. But these teams, they're not going away.
No, but this is the nature of pro sports. Like, and I was trying to say this on the panel. Okay, put Florida in their own situation. Obviously, they're unique. They're returning versus the entire team. What you're hoping for them is they get old and they get broken down and they get Bob gets an injury. Like, something happens that changes their dynamic. Because we've seen when they're at their best with that group, as they currently are, they're better than everyone else. But if we take them out, and I know you can't, but if you take them out of the Eastern Conference, who else is much better than Toronto? You can argue Tampa might be a little bit better and Washington might be a bit better and, I don't know, Carolina will be good again. Who's much better than Toronto?
They're all lumped together.
They're all lumped together, but Toronto, to me, would be at the top or towards the top of that group of 5 or 6 teams.
Yep.
And that's as is. So, that's not the worst place to be when you have a bit of cap space and you've lost a 100-point player who's such an important part of your team, they're still going to be good, better than good, and maybe will be better than that when they eventually get to whatever they look like when they're all finished. Because they're not all finished, and we'll see what that what that looks like as the summer goes on, and probably as the year goes on next year.
With Mike Johnson, our TSN hockey analyst, in terms of the teams in the West are intriguing to me because, we were talking about Vancouver prior to you coming on. Brock Besser, that was the biggest shock of the day for me, that he gets to free agency and ends up re-signing with Vancouver anyway. They keep Garland. They find a way to